All right, the recording has started, and this is the November 23rd, 2020 Crossplane community meeting. Folks are more than welcome to add themselves as attendees on the attendee list here in the agenda doc. Otherwise, I can follow up and do that as well too, so you don't have to get into the agenda doc. The biggest thing that we're working towards right now is the v1.0 release. Let me admit Krish into the meeting here. So v1.0, we have updated the roadmap. Phil updated the roadmap here. So we have all of our areas of focus there. And we kind of have those listed in this doc here. But jumping just real quick down to the schedule here is that we're targeting mid-December, around December 15th for this release. So there is something around 3 weeks left, let's say, until this 1.0 release. So I think it would be pretty wise today to check in on all of the focus areas and see what the status is and see what sort of some of the risks may be in terms of being able to deliver on the functionality that we are hoping to for the 1.0. So let me bring up the board real quick. I'm not sure if that may be, that's not gonna be the most effective view. So let's take a look at the roadmap. And I don't think it's that we need to like go through the summary here of everything, but let's kind of touch on the areas and talk about sort of the progress or the status or some of the risks that we have there that are in each one of those focus areas. Let's see. So let's just start with composition. So some of the functionality there is Nick on the line? Does anyone have an update with some of these like the composition related functionality like bidirectional patching and in the update propagation from a claim?
Yeah, I believe the claim update propagation is in. It's been merged in master. So that's one thing. Bidirectional patching, I don't think there is a PR for that yet. We're still kind of bug shedding the API style there, together with the like new patch types. Revision support for incremental upgrades. Yeah, I don't think there is a PR for that either. Support taking values from a connection secret. Yeah, we don't have a PR for that as well. And validation webhooks is like a long shot anyway, so we don't expect that to be.
Yeah, I think the webhooks is scoped. It's going to be scoped out on 1.0 as well too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Dan, do you want to get us updated on Package Manager?
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of last week / during last week, we gave some demos of Package Manager dependency resolution, and I also added to the end of the agenda today to kind of do one of those for the general community. There is a PR open that's a little messy, still needs some cleanup, but I would love to show folks on this call a little bit about what it looks like right now, but it's moving right along and should land fine for 1.0.
Awesome, that's fantastic. Cool. And then the general area of providers, I know there's been a ton of progress recently with the Amazon and Azure providers and Terraform code generation. Casey, do you want to kind of give us a quick update on all the progress on that front?
Yeah, I will let Mubarak update on the ACK side because he's been doing the work there. On Azure, let's see, Matt's going to be out for I think the month of December, so I don't think we're going to get a lot of new progress on the ASO generation. Before he goes, I do want to get a doc started with him to figure out what that looks like, but I don't think we get beyond showing like what types look like and having a plan for generation. But I think once he gets back in January, we should be able to move pretty quick. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be like a functional Azure provider for 1.0. And then on the Terraform side, there's kind of a few areas of code generation that now that we have the types and we have the types all generating, it's a matter of generating the serialization, deserialization code, and comparison code. And then otherwise, things are pretty generalized out into other layers that were already written for the kind of prototype GCP provider. So what I'm focusing on this week is the marshalling on a marshalling code, and I think a good plan for that. And so I think I think sometime early next week that should be working. And once I get to that point, I want to try to put all the pieces in place to like have I think that's enough to like be able to like create and delete once we have unmarshalling and marshalling working. So so I think I'm about a week away from seeing how everything looks together just for the create and delete case. And then there's like another type of code gen for doing comparison in order to generate updates. That would be like the next step after that. And so I think my goal is to get the Terraform provider to a place where we can at least kind of start comparing it to the ACK provider and figure out like what additional work do we need to do to get those two at parity. Which I think we'll probably get there for 1.0, but it's not going to be a full featured provider.
Yeah, that makes sense, Casey. Not having it be like a full feature provider makes a lot of sense. I think for me in my mind, the code generation and provider coverage, acceleration, et cetera, effort is kind of the least clear in my mind in terms of like what is the specific deliverable or what's going to be available along the 1.0 release. But I think there's also a lot of leeway there in terms of like just the nature of the features. There is not really like this is exactly what's going to be there. It just doesn't really necessarily lend itself to that perhaps. But it's good to see all the progress going in there and seeing like how we're getting closer to having like end-to-end resources able to be reconciled and functional. So that's really good.
Yeah, I think I think there's like a goal as well, just to get more people involved with it, and that's kind of where I want to wind up, by 1.0 as well, is to be able to have something that I'm not working on by myself, where get other people reviewing it, understanding like what's going on, so that more people can help.
And move off. Do you want to also give an update on ACK, Amazon's related stuff too?
Yeah. So we had the API gateway resources, 12 of them, and now we have the DynamoDB services, which there are only 3 of them available. So we got those generated for Crossplane as well. My target is basically before December 15, getting like all available services to be generated for Crossplane, the ones that are available in ACK. So there are issues like corresponding to each of them, like ECR, SNS, SFN, and I believe SQS. So yeah, then after getting all the services available in Crossplane, then we will start expanding the coverage of templates, which will benefit both ACK and also Crossplane provider.
Awesome.
And one thing to note that is these are not like fully featured managed resources yet. Like some of them do not have update functionality because it's not available in ACK. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally reasonable. The expectation is around parity with ACK itself, right? Like I don't see necessarily how to be generating things that like ACK doesn't even support. So that's totally reasonable. Right on. And Phil, did you have additional comments for any of these functionality areas or efforts towards 1.0?
No, I think that basically covers it. 1.0 is going to be coming out in just a few weeks, so we don't have a ton of room for anything additional. But we have started brainstorming about post 1.0 and have that down below under kind of the under consideration section. So take a look over that, and if there's any questions on that, happy to walk through that. And I will note that for that top bullet there, the first class multi-language support, that's something that I'm actively prototyping with a lot. And Moveofic is working on custom compositions to support running like CDK8's programs behind the API line in custom compositions. And so there's kind of multiple aspects of that that are all coming together. And so super excited about that and happy to talk about that in more detail if anybody's interested. And I'll drop the 2 issues that are it's 1955, if I recall correctly.
Typical Phil, spouting out the numbers. Cool. All right, so I added a link to the under consideration section of the roadmap to the agenda doc here. And then, reinforcing that we are definitely very happy to listen to and take in suggestions, feedback, comments, etc., on some of the areas of functionality and scenarios that the community at large would like to see addressed. And there we go. Oh, didn't make that a link. It looks like, here we go, spacebar link. Okay, cool. And then, I've seen some work on the IBM provider is recently too. Paolo, you're on the call. Do you want to give us an update on some of the work that's been done for provider IBM recently?
Oh yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Oh yeah, okay. Yes, so we've been making good progress. I've been working on one of the initial APIs for IBM Cloud that allows to provision IBM managed services from our IBM Cloud catalog. So there are basically probably more than 100 services that can be provisioned with that API. So the next step is I'm just going to merge a new PR to manage credentials for connected to that service. And then I think at this point, we're going to have kind of initially functioning provider that will allow to at least implement some of the examples similar to the ones you already have for some of the other services, for example, the Postgres managed service. So that will be somehow on pair with some of the other providers that you have, at least from the kind of perspective. So we are very close to that. I think we are making very good progress. And also, the thing I'd like to mention is we are trying also to do this in such a way that at some point we can also leverage code generation as well, because some of our SDKs are now also generated with the code generation. So at some point, we like also to make things in such a way that we can automatically generate the IBM providers as well. We're not there yet, but I think this is the long-term goal that we have.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the idea of that too, being able to hook into the code generation pipelines for IBM Cloud and generating coverage for more resources. And that's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, because we think, I mean, the long term, the only way to make this sustainable is to get into that kind of model. Otherwise, it will be very hard. Because we have the same problem with Terraform. We have actually a provider for Terraform. But the problem is whenever a service team make changes to the API, it takes sometimes weeks or even months before the update propagates to the provider. So we don't want to get to that situation with Crossplane as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, one thing we've kicked around is the idea of building something to do code generation from OpenAPI. So if you have OpenAPI descriptions of your APIs, that's something we should talk about.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we have. Actually, we already have a project that starting from the OpenAPI is generating all the SDKs for our APIs. So there is already a team in IBM working on that, and actually most of our APIs are actually generating SDKs, even in different languages, not just Go, but also Java and other languages. Also, they generate things like examples of usage, documentation, pretty much they do everything. At some point, maybe it will be interesting also, if you are interested, we can also show you what we are doing in that space in one of these meetings. But for now, just tell you that we are doing that for Go for sure. And we are looking now, how can we also generate the Crossplane provider? Because once we do some of the resources, some of the APIs, I think we have now the patterns that we can generate, and we can somehow try to use that to generalize more in the code generation space.
Yeah, and there could be a more interim step that we could work on where we can generate the Go types and some of the kind of boilerplate pieces for a provider from OpenAPI, before we get to actually be able to generate the reconciler.
Exactly. The way actually our team is solving some of the problems is to also add some kind of custom annotations to OpenAPI. Because of course, just taking OpenAPI is not enough to know what are you going to generate, and there are maybe some special cases that you have to deal. So we add these special annotations, and they basically drive the generation.
Well, I'd love to follow up and see what those annotations are, because that's definitely something that we're interested in. If there's any chance of standardizing that, because I think there probably are common patterns too, where all providers would need certain classes of annotations. So that would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the foresight here too, Paolo, about thinking about the kind of longer term vision and how to make it sustainable. So that's really good.
Yeah. But by the way, I just want to mention at some point we like also to probably in December to make some kind of announcement to say, IBM has been working with the Crossplane community on this IBM provider. Maybe tag along with some of the announcement you're gonna make on the version 1.0. So it will be good if we at least can show, okay, maybe there is already some initial prototype of this provider, and we can say, okay, this is how you basically can use it if you want to start kicking tires.
Yeah, I think that's great, Paolo. We'd love to make some noise about that as well too. I think that's great for everybody. So I'd love to be involved in that and do some like make some announcements in the co-fashion there.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Sweet. All right. Cool. So let's hop on down here to the community topics section. So Dan, you've got the first few bullet points here. You wanna drive for just a little bit now?
Sure. So yeah, we haven't had a TBS episode in a while, but we are definitely planning on doing the Red Hat episode with Krish. So looking forward to that. He did some work to get some things into provider AWS, which is going to make that a lot easier. And hopefully also ahead of the 1.0 release, that'll be an opportunity to show off some of the dependency resolution, as we'll obviously need some backing cloud providers for that. Also, in the same vein, want to welcome Krish as a new maintainer of provider AWS. He's been doing a lot of work on that and some really solid work. And he's been super responsive to issues and basically just embodying all the things that we have in our governance doc about what a maintainer should be. So it was an easy decision, and we are excited to have Krish committed to Crossplane for the long haul. Next thing would be there's a few new Crossplane contrib projects. So, this is kind of an org where we can spin up experimental things and keep them going and allow folks to just kind of move at their own pace without having to, ensure some level of reliability. And then the goal is eventually for things to mature into the Crossplane org. So we have a few new repos there. Provider SQL, which Nick had bootstrapped and some folks showed interest in. It is now in Crossplane contrib, and some of the folks from Vision are maintaining that. So thanks to them for stepping up for that. And they've been really receptive to folks in Slack. So we appreciate that. The new one that I just created today was Provider Secret. This is kind of an experimental one to work on while we're still trying to kind of work through how we want to store things in places other than Kubernetes secrets. The goal there is that, it kind of is an intermediary where it basically watches for secrets and syncs them to external stores such as Vault or Secrets Manager on AWS, etc. So kind of a place for us to experiment with some of these different ideas that folks have for storing credentials. So some of that stuff may end up trickling back into core Crossplane or Crossplane runtime and that sort of thing. but should be a nice way to experiment. And Publius from Ripcord is going to be leading some of the effort there, and also welcomed anyone else in the community to help out with that. Next is Crisscross, which is something I posted about a little while back. It is revolving around basically separating out the external actions that a managed reconciler takes, and putting those sort of in functions, or basically any endpoint that you can serve. So the idea is, instead of writing a full controller and installing it, you can just write an extremely simple webhook and deploy to something like a Knative service or something like that. And then create one of these registrations, and it will just send you the events at the endpoint. And you can kind of implement your stuff there. Some of the advantages of that is if you're running this webhook, you could have, the control plane running somewhere else, but you controlling all of the interaction with your cloud provider, which, allows you to manage the credentials yourself and that sort of thing. And it also just makes it a lot easier to spin up a new controller or a new resource. So definitely we'll be adding some more there. And I think some of the folks from Red Hat may be jumping in on that some. So excited to have them working there as well.
Dan, we don't have to, go down too big of a rabbit hole too quickly here, but something I was kind of curious about is there already like an auth story for this about, you give an endpoint here, and how you can be sure about who's sending you requests to do creates and updates and stuff like that, or that's like not quite there yet?
Yeah, no, definitely not there yet. Definitely want to have certificate management and that sort of thing. And one of the motivations for that would be potentially bringing something similar to this into Crossplane Core at some point in the future, that could allow it to basically have a separate package type that manage these kind of functions and set up authentication between the reconciler and the webhooks that you established. That's definitely farther down the line, and we can have a little more flexibility while it's as a standalone provider. But yeah, absolutely right now, do not use this in a production scenario, do not accept arbitrary requests, etc. The demo that you can run with the documentation here is just running within a cluster. So you're not exposing anything over the public internet or anything like that. Still, please do not run this in a production scenario. It is not well tested, but excited to see some of the direction we can go with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you had like just basically brought this up over a weekend or something like that. So I, wasn't anticipating like a full security story or anything. Like the idea here, the concept is really pretty interesting.
Sure.
So I'm really happy to see it. Yeah, thank you for this, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Already got some stars on it too.
Stars mean everything.
Oh, they do. Stars are life. All right, awesome, great. Yeah, some really cool. I love how we're using Crossplane Contrib, and we're getting like a lot of like neat projects to incubate in there, and kind of getting some good innovation going and some collaboration with the community too before they kind of become really fully maintained, kind of longer term position in the roadmap status. So I think that that's really awesome. Like the Crossplane Contrib org is having some cool stuff incubating there. All right, I wanted to share a quick reminder with everybody. So we got some recent feedback from the CNCF around the messaging and branding of our status with the CNCF. So when referring to Crossplane as being a CNCF, a Cloud Native Computing Foundation project, it's also important to refer to its status, which is its sandbox project, the earliest phase of the life cycle of a CNCF project, a sandbox, incubating, graduated. And so, if you call Crossplane a CNCF project, the appropriate way to do that is saying that it's a CNCF sandbox project. And so just a quick reminder that I wanted to share with everybody from some feedback we got from the CNCF. So KubeCon North America, that was last week. Super busy. We spent some hours there. I wanted to open the floor to hear from folks on first the general experiences, like if anybody went and saw some cool talks or anything like really interesting in the keynotes, or the experience virtually and all that sort of stuff. Did anybody have any thoughts or anything interesting to share from last week being at KubeCon?
mean, I think there was a ton of energy and stuff, and you know, just kind of not necessarily at the booth, but kind of in, you know, Slack and on Twitter and all of that. You know, there's just kind of a lot of good kind of vibes floating around, and you know, nice to see kind of all the progress that we've made, I think, you know, as a project. So kind of good to see that coming together, and a couple talks, I guess, that Jared and others did. So that was super cool. I know Dan did a talk with Stephen.
Steven's on the call here today too. That was a really good talk too, by the way. I was at Dan and Steven's talk. It was really well done.
Yeah,
I liked the meet the maintainers of the office hours track. There was a you know, I mentioned online afterwards. It would have been really nice if there was a bit more for those interactive sessions. If people were able to like hop on the video, or I don't know if that was because they literally weren't allowed, or it was difficult to figure out how to. But still, a few folks sort of typed some questions through. There was some good engagement there. I feel like I saw a couple of new faces who I don't see normally on these community meetings.
Yeah, that was a well-run session as well too, Nick. Thanks for stepping up to do the meet the maintainer session and present on Crossplane and give a demo and stuff. That was really cool. And the that was the way that the CNCF had that set up, is that they did not allow. It was technically like not even enabled for attendees to share, to do camera or audio at all. It was only through the Q&A box was the only way that they set up any interactions. Yeah, that was awesome. What did we think about like the booth experience, having the booth there? Did we feel like we got some good value out of it, or are there things that we should change? And I asked that also because they sent a survey out to the booth coordinators, which I was the coordinator for our booth here. So I have a little survey link to fill out on, you know, what we thought of the booth and the, you know, experience and what we would change and stuff like that. So if anybody has any thoughts, you know, please do share right now.
I'll say that the like user experience of pinging people to chat was I think needs to be worked on. It's like people would kind of, it would show them as being in the booth, but then most people would kind of just like decline the chat requests. So maybe there could be like a better representation of presence and interest in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was just the Crossplane booth being slightly harder to discover maybe than the actual sponsor booths, with it being sort of only accessible via the drop-down menu. But I mean, I think I had 3 4-hour shifts, and I would say that I was there for like 60% of those shifts, maybe 75% with distractions and meetings and things like that. And I saw literally no one coming to our Zoom the link the whole time, sort of thing. So I know that's different than coming to the actual booth, but my gut feeling is we could have not had a booth and it would have been the same. I don't know if the morning shifts were busier or something like that, but
yeah, I see it. Like that's kind of similar to my thoughts, Nick, where I'm not seeing it as a great opportunity in terms of quantity for the number of engaging conversations you can have. I think that we did have some of those, you know, like when people joined the Zoom, it was really the main way that we got to talk to people, but it was a small number. So it's not a large quantity of having good engaging conversations, nowhere near the number that you have with the real physical booth. So the value I'm thinking you mainly get is like the presence there of having the booth there, being like just one of 5 for the CNCF projects, you know, seeing the logo, going there, having access to all of our docs, our, you know, our links to Slack, our, you know, our recent blog posts, like all that sort of stuff is super useful for people to self-serve and get access to that and, you know, get some awareness out. But I would definitely not use staff 2 people sitting there, you know, at the booth the entire time. Like one person could handle it, and then we could even consider having a more automated thing of, you know, like here's access to all our content, you know, like ping us here on Slack if you want to get into a conversation, but not like necessarily sit on a Zoom the whole time.
yeah, I had the same thought, and I would again, not having seen the morning shifts, so but from my perspective, I would not have anyone on those booths. I would have it just be like, hey, this is unstaffed. We're on Slack over here, sort of thing. Like, love to chat to you.
Yeah. Yeah, the awareness aspect, I like, especially because it's free. We don't like, it's a free thing from the CNCF. So just having the logo there and getting access to our content and having people be able to discover us and find us and come interact with the community, like that's super worthwhile. Absolutely. I'll have my finger on the booth button for EU also, but we should reconsider our staffing.
It was a good opportunity to talk to like Phil and Dan and Marcus and Movopic and people who are like in the booth. There was a good hallway track to the booth, but otherwise, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, I also looked at the GitHub statistics for Crossplane repo, and it seems like there's an uptick during the KubeCon, so that's also something. So people seeing there, they just like, some of them at least go to like, Crossplane project page directly.
That's cool. Nice. Cool. All right. And then another reminder here that the call for proposals for the next KubeCon is less than the end of it. The deadline is less than a month away. So December 13th, which is like 3 weeks from now, is another lovely deadline for submitting a talk and attempting to be a speaker and share your ideas with the greater ecosystem at the KubeCon for EU, which will already be virtual. It is definitely not an in-person event, so it will be virtual. All right, so that's KubeCon. I don't see any links to PRs that need discussion this time. So that would be the end of the full section of content and agenda topics before moving on to the optional time. So I wanted to pause for a second, and before we go to the optional deeper technical discussions phase of the meeting, in which people are more than welcome to break off and sign off of the meeting. But before we do that, I wanted to open the floor again for any other topics or things on folks' mind that they wanted to bring up with the full meeting attendance here.
Yeah, sure. Could you tell us a little bit about the plans for the community day on the 15th?
Yeah, Phil, can you take that one?
Yeah, totally. So Community Day, we basically did one back in May. And so we're doing them roughly like twice a year. And so this will be the second Crossplane Community Day, and it's where we get people together from all over the community, especially those focused around, managing, kind of via Kubernetes, all the different things. And so Crossplane, does a particularly good job of that. So when you think about managing cloud APIs, when you think about, managing apps, and kind of having that, Kubernetes API machinery there. And so historically, we've had, various folks from the Kubernetes ecosystem, a lot of whom have been on the new, the binding status, the TBS. And so that, also has included folks like, the CDK folks from AWS, who are basically writing, like language bindings on top. We had Kelsey Hightower kind of, give the keynote there. And so he's going to be coming back along with a handful of others, including like Joe Beta and Brendan Burns, and many of the folks that we're collaborating closely with in the community, like, Jay Pipes and others. So I think Dan's going to be kicking it off. Bassam's going to do a little kind of a keynote, and then we're just going to kind of dive into, kind of the panel discussion. And so I think Kelsey's going to be moderating that. And yeah, it's going to be a really great, crowd. We have a bunch of lightning talks as well from various folks who are using Crossplane in various forms to enable self-service for developers, running it in production, and just kind of sharing their stories about, how they're using Crossplane and why it's meaningful to them.
Okay, does that mean the agenda's full then?
No, we're still, if you want us, do a talk, definitely reach out on Slack, and, we can look at getting a time slot. Probably be like a lightning demo, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as Paolo said, there's kind of some interest on the IBM side to kind of make a little bit of noise and formally, announce that we've been working with the Crossplane community and so on. And lining up with the community day and the V1 driver sounds like a good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So is this Paolo?
It's Chris talking, but yes, I work with Paolo.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll pencil you all in and then just reach out on Crossplane Slack.
Sure.
Sweet. That's exciting. Dan, it looks like you're in pretty good company on this page here, buddy.
I'm appropriately listed last. So that's what I would say.
See if you can drag and drop here. Just drag Dan over here. There we go. Look, I'm hacking. Oh, it didn't work. Right on. Cool, man. Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Chris. Yeah, great question. All right, so I think then, Dan, we can hop on over to, you wanted to do a demo of dependency resolution. And just a reminder too, that this, we are now moving into the optional time section. Not that Dan's demo isn't amazing, but this is an optional time section here. So if folks want to take off for the remainder of the block here, they're more than welcome to. But I'll stay on here and watch this, Dan. So let me give you share. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Gotcha. Okay,
There
so I
we
know a fair number of folks have already seen this demo, but it's a fairly, I think, important, I would say, feature how this works in Crossplane. So I just wanted to have, number one, for the folks on the call, and also so we have a recorded presentation of what this looks like, so we can point any folks to it if they'd like to see. So as you can see here, I have, let me zoom in a bit. Maybe. I have a dependency tree here, which basically this feature is that you're able to declare your dependencies in your crossplane.yaml for either a configuration or provider or any type of future package we support. And you're able to supply dependency ranges basically on any number of other packages. You can get arbitrarily complex with how you declare your dependencies. So in this case, we have a top level configuration, which it'd probably be helpful also if I went ahead and showed an example of what these configurations that are here look like. So I basically just have all these configuration no ops, which basically means they install, but they don't really do anything. And so the top level one, I have A has a dependency on B and C, and basically saying any version is fine. And then B has a dependency on D and E, C has a dependency on just E, etc. And then D and E have dependencies on providers and configurations, respectively. And then you can see some of these version ranges here. We'll definitely have some updated documentation about the syntax for semantic versions, but basically we have a very expressive syntax that lets you basically define any sort of range you would like, including explicit ranges or, typical kind of like comparison operator ranges, excluding pre-release versions, etc. But basically what we want to see is when you install A, that you're able to get all of these configurations and providers installed with appropriate versions. That's a difficult problem because these are packaged up as OCI images, and the contents of the OCI image, which have the crossplane.yaml in them, declare what the transitive dependencies will be. So when you actually install provider AWS, or excuse me, configuration A here, when we look and see that there's a dependency on B and C and we're allowing any version, we don't know what the dependencies are that each of those versions have until we actually download and unpack them. We don't want to download every version, especially if you have some sort of constraint like here where we're saying any version is fine, right? We don't want to check the contents of every version and look through them. We are fine with listing the available versions and getting one that fits in the constraint. So for instance, if you use this constraint, we should have the latest version of each of these installed. And by latest, we enforce semantic versioning in that regard with Crossplane. So that is a layer on top of OCI images, which obviously your tagging strategy for OCI images does not have to be semantic versions. So if you want to opt out of that, you're going to need to, declare explicit tags. All right, so I already have Crossplane running here. So I want to show kind of what happens when we install the A here and see how the rest of the dependencies are resolved. And basically what's going to happen is we are going to first resolve B and C, and then each of their dependencies, etc. This is a valid dependency graph here. There's no cycles. It is a valid DAG, so it should install correctly. One thing that could happen is if D and E had incompatible, dependencies on AWS. For instance, D said, I need less than version 0.11, and E said, I need greater than version 0.12. Then this dependency tree would then become invalid. And we would discover that once we got down to that level of resolution. So to kind of visualize what's happening here, I'm going to go ahead, should give a little more space here. And I will watch our configurations. And then I'll go ahead and install our top level configuration. And I've got this in the Upbound package registry under my personal account. And this is config nop A. And I've just pushed one version and it's 0.0.1. So all of these config nops that I showed that are kind of in this dependency tree, they all only have one version push, which is 0.0.1. So we should see that used for all of them. When we look at the bottom level dependencies on AWS and Helm, E specifies 0.13 or greater, and D specifies any version. So I believe the latest AWS is either 14 or 15. So we should see that version. And then our Helm dependency says greater than 0.3.1. I believe the latest there is 0.3.7. So we should see that version installed. And it could take a few cycles for them all to become healthy, but I'll watch providers down here. All right, so we see config nop A come in, and then B, and then C, and then D, and then E. And then once all those are installed, we now see AWS and Helm come through. They're all going through kind of their installation process here. So creating their resources, starting their controllers, etc. We see that there is a bit of cycle here. One of the things we're going to look at cleaning up after getting this dependency resolution in is hopefully less cycling on, health of things that are installed. Just because it's a better user experience to not see, true, false, true. We'd like to be able to minimize that if possible. But what you're seeing is eventually all of these are becoming true. And then our top level A also became true. So if we go ahead and exit this watch, we should see that we have all installed and healthy versions here. And they've all been installed basically by this one command with config nop A, which you can imagine, if you have a large platform that has a lot of different components, this can be really valuable to have this robust dependency resolution scenario. However, you could also kind of like choose your level of granularity in packaging. You could just say, all the things in these different configurations, let's just put them in one big bundle. And then all you have to worry about is the providers that it relies upon, and you can be, a little more safe about your versioning. Whereas, if you have all these different packages, you have to worry about, versioning conflicts when it gets down to the lowest level. One of the things I do want to mention is that if we push a new version of provider AWS, and let's say we push a new version of B actually, and said it was 0.0.2. And then in config nop A, we said this requires 0.0.2. When you roll forward to config nop A, the new version of it, we're not going to automatically go and update config nop B. The reason for that is it would be relatively complex, and you don't really know who the top level packages. If we had another configuration here, so a completely separate dependency tree that just had a reliance on B, and said, you can't upgrade to the newest version, that violates my constraints. Even if A says I need 0.0.2, when we roll forward, we're not going to automatically go to 0.0.2 on that dependency. even if it would be okay for the range for the other. The reason for that is it can be, somewhat unexpected, and it's just a little bit easier to say, hey, like, I want you to know this new version of A is not healthy. You can roll back to a healthy state, which you knew was good, or you can go and update config not B, which is the one that's not fitting in the version range. So, in the future, we could say, all right, we will intelligently say this fits within the version constraints for all your different packages. But for the short term, we think it's a little easier to say, once something's installed as a dependency, we treat it as a top level thing. So you update that and you roll it forward and backward. But anyway, like I said, we imagine a lot of these are just going to have a single level of dependencies that says, hey, I need AWS, GCP, and Azure, or I need AWS and Helm, etc. But we do want to provide a robust option for folks that need to do that. Last thing I want to mention, I know this has gone on a little while now. The way this is working behind the scenes is we have a singleton resource. So basically, we've introduced a new type. Right now, it's called the lock. We may change it to blueprint or some other name. But basically, it's kind of like a go.sum file, if you're familiar with that. And so if we, let me just get the lock, and I'll show you a little bit about what the output looks like. All right, so it's basically, that is not what I meant to do, but it works nonetheless. Basically, it's a list of the installed packages and any other dependencies. So you'll see AWS and Helm have no dependencies. But if we look up to something like config not E, you can see all the constraints that it has on the different dependencies it has. So you can think about this as a reflection of the graph and edges that exist between the nodes in the graph. And so you can imagine if we have this kind of like snapshot of the cluster at a future date, it may make sense to be able to kind of like save this snapshot and be able to restore a cluster in terms of its packages by just creating this lock and having it kind of like auto install the missing packages. Right now, if there's a package in the lock and it doesn't exist in the cluster, we're not going to auto install that for you. We would just, let you know about that. But you could see a nice kind of like restore story with that as well. So anyway, that's kind of how it's working right now. Hopefully this is a demo that, some folks can reference back to in the future. But as this is something we definitely move towards merging, wanted to go ahead and give a demo for folks.
Right on, Dan. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think it's great functionality too, especially when you can author a package and then the consumer of that package doesn't have to care about installing everything else. Like, oh, why is my package broken and things aren't working? This error message I traced down, I have to do what? I have to install who? So it's nice to be able to add automation wherever we can to streamline the experience and minimize potential for failures. So that's great, man. Cool, and that was everything we had on the full agenda now. So if there are no other things that people want to bring up, then we can go ahead and adjourn then.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to say I saw Daniel and I think it was Steve's presentation on KubeCon on Friday, and super blown away. I want to get in this as much as possible. So I'm going to try showing up and getting involved. I'm going to get caught up so I can speak intelligently about it on what you guys are doing. But noob here, and just wanted, hopefully you'll see my name pop up more and more and face with the name.
Right on. Douglas or Doug?
Either one. Doug.
Cool. Well, welcome to the community, Doug. It's great to see you here. Thanks for joining, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we'll see you on Slack too for anything you want to chat about as well too. The Crossplane Slack is like a great place to go anytime in between these community meetings are just once every 2 weeks. So we're always active on there and we can get in conversations anytime there.
Excellent. That sounds great.
Right on. Cool. Alrighty. With that then, on that high note there, we'll go ahead and adjourn. All right, thanks everybody.
See you guys.